Today's
Hello.
Daf Yomi. Today's Daf Yomi is sponsored by Tzvi Gimnitsky in memory of his grandfather, Reb Tzvi Gimnitsky. And so we're going to start on the bottom of 14b in the Talmud, 8 lines from the bottom. On the bottom of 14b, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Arba nichnasu bepardes. 4 entered into the orchard. Ve'eluhein, these are the 4 people who entered into the orchard. Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, and Rabbi Akiva. The 4 who entered into the pardes, the orchard, were Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, and Rabbi Akiva. How did they get there? So the orchard is obviously this mystical place, and Rashi says they said the name of God and then they ascended to heaven. Tosfos says they didn't say the name of God. They didn't ascend to heaven. They were in a mystical trance. Meditative trance. So these are the 4 people: Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Achar, Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says something. I read this many times. I still don't understand it. He says, when you come to the pure marble, Al tomru mayim mayim. Don't say water, water. Mishum shenemar dover shekarim lo yikonu neged einai. Don't say there's water there, because there's no water. It's not really water. You're going to be up in heaven. Nothing there is actually water. Anyway, Ben Azai hitzitz v'meis. Ben Azai looked and he died. Why did he die? So Rashi says because he looked at God. Even though Ben Azai was a tzaddik, you're not allowed to look at God and live. It says that in the verse. We read that last Shabbos. So therefore, Ben Azai looked and he died. However, because of Omer about him, the pasuk says, "Precious in the eyes of God is the death of the pious." Ben Zoma hitzitz v'nifka. Ben Zoma, he looked at God, or Ben Zoma he looked at God, and guess what happened? Or he peeked. Thank you. He peeked at God. V'nifka, he was wounded, meaning he was never the same. However, because of Omer dvash matzata achol dayacha pentis ba'inu v'haketo. So basically, you find honey, don't eat too much because then it could damage you, and that's what happened here. Acher kitzitz benentios. He cut down the young trees. He uses an expression of trees because they use the metaphor of an orchard. So he cut down the trees. He went into this beautiful place and he tried to destroy it. Nothing more sad than seeing somebody cut down a young tree, right? So it's a sad thing in an orchard. It's such a tragic thing to see. I mean, obviously there's worse, but it's so symbolically sad. Rabbi Akiva yatsa b'shalom. Rabbi Akiva went out in peace. Only Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and went out in peace. So Shaul has Ben Zoma Mao is Sarusei Kalba. Then they asked Ben Zoma the question. We don't know if they asked him before he went in or after he went in, but they asked him the question: are you allowed to neuter a dog? You're allowed to neuter a dog. So the Torah says you're not allowed to neuter an animal, but it's next to the prohibition, next to the concept of the blemished animals, the animals that have defective for a sacrifice. So they want to know if you're allowed to neuter a dog, because maybe Rashi says that they had the idea that since you're not allowed to exchange a dog for another animal and bring that other animal as a sacrifice, mechir kelav, so maybe the prohibition doesn't apply to the blemished animal, to the neutering of the dog. So Ben Zoma says it does. It says you're not allowed to neuter your animals. So it's a big question today. How do people do it? Because obviously almost every dog owner I know has their dog neutered. So obviously that's a question to discuss, to figure out with your spiritual advisor on matters of Jewish law, what's the proper way to do it. So, or how to do it. So the Gemara says, Shaul has Ben Zoma. They asked Ben Zoma the question. Besuah. By the way, if you hear some banging in the background, it's called bangings of blessing, because that's the banging of the ductwork going into our holy yeshiva. So Shaul has Ben Zoma. So they asked Ben Zoma the following question: Besuah she'ibra ma'ala kohen gadol. If a virgin is pregnant, is she allowed to marry the kohen gadol? What? If a kohen gadol is not allowed to marry anybody who's not a virgin. The high priest can only marry a virgin. So if the woman comes along and kohen gadol wants to marry her and she's eight months pregnant, she's 9 months pregnant, but she says, "Don't worry, I'm a virgin." So is he still allowed to marry her? So the Gemara says, "What are you talking about? How's the scenario?" So the Gemara says, do we have to be concerned about Shmuel's position? The Amar Shmuel said Shmuel was an expert. He knew how to have relations with a woman who was still a virgin without rupturing her hymen, without creating blood. So maybe that's what happened here, that they were able to have the relations and kept her hymen intact. Or perhaps maybe Shmuel was actually skilled, but Shmuel's position is not found. So Ben Zoma says, Shmuel's is not common. You can't rely upon that. But we still have another concern. If she claims she's a virgin, we could say, she became pregnant from a bath, meaning to say she went into a bath and the person before her had deposited seed there, and that's what made her pregnant. Like the Gemara says elsewhere, Jeremiah went into the bath, and from Jeremiah, staying in the bath, Ben Sira was born. So that's the concept. So the Gemara asked the question, but how is it possible for the person to become impregnated when we have a concept that Shmuel says any seed that doesn't shoot forth like an arrow cannot make you pregnant? So he says, that's talking about the potency of the seed, but originally this was also very potent and it shot forth like an arrow. I asked our friend Ben has a question.
I have a few questions now, but first, what is a virgin?
So that's the question, what they're discussing. What is the definition of a virgin? And that's a good question. I don't want to go into it now. Maybe afterwards we'll go into it. But the simplest reading of this is the virgin is a woman whose hymen is intact. So that's the simplest reading.
And then in New York, by the way, they have many surgeons offer re-virginization, and a lot of girls have to do it because they're liable to get killed.
Oh, yeah.
The very first night. It's a very short honeymoon if they're not virgin.
Okay, so that's a very interesting point. It's very complicated. Yeah, so we'll go into that afterwards. So once we shut off the YouTube recording, we can have a discussion. But certain things, like we weren't in this chapter, Ein Dorshan, certain things we have to talk about only with referring to them, not explicit, especially in like. Although I'm sure if we talked about that, then we'd have a lot more subscribers than currently 198 people that subscribe to our YouTube channel. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, so Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya was once standing on the upper part of the Temple Mount. The Ra'u ben Zoma, and he saw this Ben Zoma, Ben Zoma, who was Nifka, he was wounded, he was not mentally the same. He didn't stand up. He was so immersed in his trance. He didn't stand up for Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. You go to the Temple Mount, you go to the Kotel, and you'll see people have what's called the Jerusalem syndrome, which is a real thing where people they're moved to such a degree when they're in that place that they're not stable. So Ben Zoma didn't stand up before him. Amar my I am Ben Zoma. So Rabbi Yeshua says, from where and to where are you going? He says, Sofa He says, I was gazing between the upper waters and the lower waters. There's only 3 fingers in between them. As it states, the Spirit of God is hovering over the water, like a dove that's hovering over her children. The Aina no gas, but she doesn't touch them. Amar and Rabbi Yeshua tell me that Rabbi Yeshua said to his students, sorry. Adayim Ben Zoma b'chutz. Ben Zoma is still not the same. Ben Zoma is still b'chutz. When was this the ruach hovering over the water? It was only on the first day. Avdallah, when did the separation come between the waters? It was only on the second day. And how much was it separated between the 2 waters? A kama, like a hair's breadth. Rabbanan Amri Kiguda the Gamo, like the planks of a bridge, and Marzutra Timmervas, he says, Ketre Guime de Prise Adadi, like 2 cloaks spread on each other. Amri like Ketre Kose de Sachife Adadi, like 2 cups, one is inserted in the other. Okay, now we get up to Elisha ben Avuya, who we haven't yet said his name. Till now, we're going to call him by the name Achar, which means the other one. We'll see why he's called the other one, but Achar Kitz Benetios, he cut down the saplings. The Lava Kosim Omer, about him it says, don't give your mouth to make your flesh sin. Meaning you said something and you made yourself sin. What happened? What happened to Elisha ben Avuya? Chaza, he was up in heaven. What did he see when he was in this paradise? He saw Matitron, one of the angels, this Yavale Rishutza from Mesav, and they gave this Metatron permission to sit down in heaven and to write down all the merits of the Jewish people. Elisha ben Avuya saw this. He said, "Gemira do amala lo habe lo yeshiva lo tachras lo oref." We have a concept that in heaven you don't have anybody sitting, you don't have any competition, you don't have any oref, you don't have any stubbornness, lo ifo, you don't have any tired. And here Metatron is sitting. Maybe maybe there's two authorities in heaven. There's two chiefs, God and Metatron. They were so upset at Metatron that he created this scenario. Afkula Metatron machu shitin pulse denura. They took him out. They took out Metatron and they gave him 60 pulse denura, 60 strikes. Pulse denura, is that a word in modern Hebrew? They use it, no, but I see sometimes rabbinic literature they refer to like electricity as pulse denura. So Amarlai my time. What's the reason that ki chazita lo kamta mikmei? What's the reason why you didn't get up for Elisha ben Avuya? You should have got up. It's Yaveh Rishuso Mimcham Sechusev. So since Elisha ben Avuya went astray, they gave Metatron now the permission to wipe away all his merits. Yadsta Baskol v'Amra, a heavenly voice went out and said, Shuvu vanim shovavim, one of the saddest lines in the whole Talmud. Return my children, return my sons, chutz me Achar, except for Achar, he can't return. He's still called a son, but he can't return. Achar, when Achar heard this, Amar, he says, well, since I lost everything, let me go at least have some hedonistic pleasure in this world. Nafeg Achar, he went after bad stuff. Nafak Ashkach Zona. Achar found this prostitute. Found the prostitute. What happened when he finds this harlot? He says to her, I lost my place. He said, Tava, he desired to be with her. Amroi, she said to him, V'lab Elisha ben Avuyat? I can't be with you. You're Elisha ben Avuya. You're this great scholar. Akar Pugla mi Mishra b'Shabbos v'Yavla. It was Shabbos then. He took a radish from a flower bed and he ripped it up from the ground, the violation of Shabbos, and he gave it to her. Amra, she said, Acher. She said to him, okay, you're not Elisha ben Avuya, you're Acher, you're another. Shal Achar asked Rabbi Meir. So Achar had a student, Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was a great Torah scholar. So Achar asked Rabbi Meir, even after Achar was a heretic, he still stayed in touch with his student, and they had a chavrusa together, as we see. He said, what do you do with the verse? Also this and also this God made. So Amar Lo. So Rabbi Meir said, God created two things. Everything he created had something similar to it. Bara Harim, Bara Gvos, created mountains, he created hills. Bara Yam and Bara Naras, he created seas, he created rivers. Amar Lo. So Achar says to Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva Rabcha Lo Amar Kach. Your Rabbi Akiva didn't say that. What did Rabbi Akiva say? He said Bara Tzadikim Bara Shaim. It means he made opposites. He created the wicked, he created the righteous, he created the wicked. Bara Gan Eden, Bara Gan, he created the Garden of Eden, created hell. Everybody has two parts. Everybody has two parts. Everybody gets, when you're created, you have a ticket to hell and a ticket to heaven. If you're righteous, you get your part and your friend's part. Meaning it's a zero-sum game. The parts get divided. Nischayev, if he's guilty, Nischayev Russia, not you take your part and your friend's part in hell. Amar Masharsha Mikra, what's the verse? Gabe Tzadikim, by the righteous, it says, Lachem Baratzam Mishneh Yershu. In their land, they will inherit a double portion. And by the wicked ones, it's written, Gabe Risham Ksiv, Umishnesh Shibaron Shivram. So they'll get a double break. Show Achar Rabbi Meir, Achar Shayatzot Haratzra. Achar asked Rabbi Meir after he went bad, Maidach Siv, Lo Yarchana Zahav Uzachuchas, that gold and glass cannot even express its value for it. Utmurata klipaz, and in exchange for it is a golden vessel. Amar Lo. So Rabbi Meir says, you know what this refers to? This refers to Divrei Torah, refers to Torah. Sheikashim with nosa kaklizav klipaz. It's so hard to buy Torah. You can't even buy with all the gold. And you can lose it in a second like a glass utensil. So Elisha ben Avuya turned to him and he says, no, Amar Lo, Rabbi Akiva Rabcha Lo Amar Kach. Your Rabbi Akiva didn't say that. He says, what does this mean? He says, just like a golden vessel and a glass utensil, even though they break, you can fix them. He says a Torah scholar, even though he's gone bad, can be fixed. So when Meir heard Elisha ben Avuya say that, he said to him, Amrlo, chazor bach. So he said, you also return. Amrlo, kvar shamati mechorei paragud. I already heard from the other side of the paragud, from the other side of the partition, maybe in heaven, maybe in the Holy of Holies. Shuvu vanim shuvavim. Return, my children, chutz mi'achar. Everyone can come back except for Achar. One time Achar was riding on a horse on Shabbos. Meir was following him. So
Rabbi,
even though,
can
yes,
you hear me? I have a couple
yes.
questions on Achar. What was the heretical thing that he did?
Well, at this point, it seems like he believed in dualism. He believes that there's,
Okay.
but it doesn't actually specify. It just says he became a heretic. It doesn't say exactly what he did that was so heretical. But you're right that doesn't explain it. It's a very good point.
Okay. And then the second question is, after he became a heretic, how is it that he's involved in this study of Torah with his student?
The Gemara is going to address that question. The Gemara is going to address that question right now. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir says to him, go back. So he was studying the Torah, and while he's studying the Torah, so he's walking with him on Shabbos. Rabbi Meir is riding the horse. Elisha ben Avuya is riding the horse on Shabbos, which is a rabbinic prohibition. Rabbi Meir is following him to study Torah from his mouth. Amar lo, he says to him, Meir, Chazor acharecha, shekvar shiarti bikvei sus. I know how to calculate with my horse that you've walked as far as you're allowed to walk on Shabbos. Ad chan tkum Shabbos. You can't go anymore. Of course, this could all be metaphorical. You stop talking to me. You've gone as far as you can without. You have to turn back. You can only engage with a heretic for so much. So he says, Amarei afatach ozer bach. So Rameir said, you also come back. Amarei, Elisha ben Avuya says, Lo kvar martilcha. Didn't I already say to you, kvar shamati mechorei paragud shuvu vanum shovavim. Return, my children, return. Chutz mi'achar. Everybody can go back except for Achar. So Rabbi Meir, Takfei, Rabbi Meir grabbed a hold of Achar. He grabbed him, took him into the base medrash. Yanuka. So they had a belief that if they would stop a child and say, "What pasuk did you learn today?" that would be basically a reference to it was almost like a prophecy. So they said to the Yanuka, they said to the child, Psokli psukech, teach me the verse you said. Amrlo ein shalom amar Hashem l'rashaim. He said, God says there's no peace to the wicked. Meaning you're done. They went to another synagogue. Give me a verse. Even if you clean it with soap, your sin will remain. All these are bad for Acher. They went to a third place. They went to a third place. They said to the child, give me a verse. Meaning to say, even if you make yourself look beautiful with all the makeup in the world, you're still going to look ugly. Meaning you can't get rid of your sin. They went to a third synagogue. They went to 13 synagogues. Kulu Paskue. They all gave him this verse, in the same way. But Basra, finally, at the end, he says, give me a verse. He said to the last one, the last kid said, to the wicked one, say, came to the wicked one. God says, why are you talking about my laws? Meaning, stop speaking. He said to the wicked one, we don't want to hear your laws. Well, at that point, the problem was, in addition to it being a bad prophecy, it's not what Elisha ben Avuya heard, because that child didn't speak clearly. Megamgim belishna and Ishtama kamada amarle. Elisha amarakim. The Elisha, it sounded like he said God told Elisha to stop speaking. And so some say Ikadamri Sakina Havebade. Some say that Elisha had a knife with him. Vikare, and he ripped up this child. Vishadre Latleser Bekanishti. He sent him to 13 synagogues. Vikadamri Amar Ihave Biyade Sakina. If I did have a child, have a Karinole, I would tear him apart. This teaches us that if you have a bad philosophy, it can lead to violence. That's the way I read that story. Kinach Navshe, when Elisha ben avua kinach nafshe da'achar, when Achar died, Amri lo meido le'dainei v'lo la'alma da'aseh v'lo le'isiv v'lo. So he says, lo meido le'dainei, we can't bring him to judgment. V'lo la'alma da'aseh, we can't le'isiv, we can't bring him to the world to come. Lo meido le'dainei, we can't judge him. Mishum da'aseh l'raisa, he studied Torah. V'lo la'alma da'aseh, we can't bring him to the world to come. Mishum da'chata, because he sinned. So Amar Rabbi Meir Torah mutav du'adaina v'leisi la'alma da'aseh. So he said, better off judge him. And when Matai Amos ve'ela, Hashem Mikivro, he says better off take him to hell to judgment now, and then when I die, I'll bring up his smoke with me from his grave. Kinach nafshe Rabbi Meir, when Rabbi Meir died, saw a kutra mikivri da'achar. Indeed, what was going on was the smoke was coming up from Achar's grave. Indeed, that's what was going on. But Rabbi Yochanan wasn't. So Rabbi Yochanan wasn't happy with that because what happened was, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Gvurta Mikoi Rabbi Chad Hava Beinana V'lo Matzinan Latzule. Is it a great thing that we have one of our Torah scholars amongst us and we can't basically save him from this judgment? Inakte biyad. He said, "I'll take him by my hand." Mamaramile. Who's going to stop me? Man Amar Matai Amut V'achpeh Hashem Mikivro. He says, "Who's going to say when I die, I'm going to stop the smoke from his grave?" So Kinach Nafshe Rabbi Yochanan, when Rabbi Yochanan died, indeed he took up Elisha ben Avuya from the grave, Pasa Kutra Mikivrei, and the smoke stopped from his grave of Achar. Pasa Choleahu Saftana, there was a eulogizer there. He said, Afilu Shomar Pesach O Amar Lefanecha Rabbeinu. He said, even the guardian of hell cannot stop our teacher. Bito Shel Acher, the daughter of Acher. Hold on. Bill, you had a question?
Yeah, I would. I don't want to interrupt you though. I can ask at the end if that's better.
Okay, yeah, we'll do for 5 more minutes, and then I'll
Okay.
stay as long as the people want to answer any questions.
Okay.
So then, what Bito Shel Acher, the daughter of Acher, also coming to Rebbe, she came in front of Rebbe. Amra, she said to him, Rebbe Parnaseni, Rebbe, I need some money. I'm poor. Amar La, they said to her, Bat Miat, whose daughter are you? So he said, Amar Lo, Bito Shel Acher, I'm Acher's daughter. Amar La, Adai Yesh Mizara Ba'olam. So he says, how could his children still be here in the world? He's not going to have any descendants. Remember his Torah, don't remember his deeds. The fire went down with Sichsacha and burned Rebbe. So Rebbe was punished. The bench of Rebbe was burned. Bacha v'amar, she cried and said, Rebbe, so Bacha v'amar, Rebbe cried. He said, Malas ganin ba. If this is how people who attack God are protected, imagine how those who praise God. Rabbi Meir. So now the Gemara asked the question that Baruch Yosef was asking. Rabbi Meir, how could Rabbi Meir study Torah from Acher? How could you do it? What does it say in the verse? What does it mean when it says in the verse, you shall seek Torah, ki malach Hashem tzivakos, you seek Torah from an angel, meaning if the Rebbe is like an angel, you could study from him, otherwise don't study Torah from him. How could Rabbi Meir study Torah from Acher? So Amar Reish Lakish, Rabbi Meir Krash Kach V'Darash. Reish Lakish says Rabbi Meir in a different verse. He says, listen to the ears of the sages, and your heart should turn to my opinion. Don't listen to the sages, but listen to God. Whereas Rav Chanina says, Mehacha, Shem'i bat uri'i v'ati aznech v'shechachi amech u'beit avich. So we see from here, so that there's another verse that says that you can listen and then forget what your father's teachings are, meaning to say only listen to some and not the others. So kasha kra adadi. So there's a contradiction between the verses. So how do we explain this? Mokasha habagado habakatan. It depends if the person is a child, if the person is young, unsophisticated. If the person is young, unsophisticated, you have to be sure to only study from somebody who's pure. But if the person is older, he's sophisticated, you could discern, you could study from somebody who's more complicated, because then you're able to get the best parts and not take the other parts. And indeed, Kiasi Avdimi, Amar Amri b'Ma'arav Rabbi Meir Achal Ticha v'Shadi Shechol Levra. Rabbi Meir ate the fruit and threw the pit away. Darash Rava Maidach Siv Al Ginat Egos Yarati Orot Bavei Anachal. What does it mean? Lama Nimshlu Talmid Chacham Egos where Torah scholars compared to a nut. Omar Chama Egos Zeh Afapisha Meluchach Petit Ubitsoa Ema Shebetocho Nimas. Even though this Torah scholar is dirty with garbage, nevertheless the inside of the nut remains edible. Aftam Chacham, so to a Torah scholar, Afapisha Sarach, even though he's basically gone astray. Ein Torah so nemeset. The Torah is not destroyed or defiled. Ashkacha Rabbi Bar Shila Le'Eliyahu. Rabbi Bar Shila found Elijah. Amalei Micah Aved HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, "What's God doing at this moment? What's God doing now?" Amalei. That's what they would finds Elijah. He says to Elijah, "What's God doing?" He said, "Amalei Kamar Shmaita Mipumayo Dekul Rabbanan." He's God is saying over the teachings of all the rabbis. And Mipumi de Rabbi Meir will come up, but God's not repeating the teachings of Rabbi Meir. Amalei Amai. So he says, why not? He says, why not? So he says, because the reason why he's not is because he heard teachings from Acher, because Rabbi Meir used to study teachings from Acher. So Amarle, Amai. But why? Rabbi Meir Rimo Matzah, Tocho Achol Klipatzo Zarat. But why not? Rabbi Meir found the pomegranate, he ate the fruit, and he threw away the rind. So why? So he had a good argument. When God heard this, God changed his tune. I'm like, Hasha Kamar Meir B'ni. Wow, this is what my son Meir said. Now I changed my mind. Bismat, and so Omer. So he said that once I found out that Rabbi Meir, my son, said this. He says Meir B'ni Omer. He said so. God used to now say, my son Meir teaches. He changed it because he was convinced by this argument. So we see from here, and so we say from here, Bisman Sha'adam Mitzvah, when a person is worried about his sins, Shechina Ma'lashon Omeret, what does the divine presence say? Kalani Maroshi, Kalani Mizroi, meaning to say, I have basically a headache and my hands hurt because we created a person who died from their sins. And if this is God's distress over the blood of the wicked, how much more so of the blood of the righteous who are spilled. Now, I'll take some questions in a moment, but I just want to say that, what's the upshot, the takeaway, executive summary of this Gemara is twofold. First of all, everybody can return except for Elisha, but in the end, we don't rule like that. Elisha could have returned. He did return. After his death, they brought him back. And number two was that God doesn't give up on anybody at all. He was able to come back. He's able to come back. And even Rabbi Meir in the end was quoted by God. He says, Meir B'ni Omer, Shuvu Banim Chut Shovavim. Then my children can come back. That just like a child will always be a parent's child, no matter what. Like if you could have a spouse, Rahman al-San, sometimes you get divorced. You could have a friend, you could be best friends, you break up. A child, no matter what the child does, the child is always the child. That relationship can never be biologically severed. And that's what this Gemara is saying. A child is always, Meir B'ni, Elisha B'ni, we're always the children of God. So there's always hope to come back. Even though Elisha seems to be like he can't come back, the Gemara is basically saying he can come back. All right, I'm going to, I know people